in the greater Washington, D.C. community who are unable to pay. In our first months, we have held a successful 5-part taharat hamishpacha refresher class this summer, attended by 75 women who have trained 10 mikvah attendants and contributed to a national OU mikvah attendant training. And we have supported 2 kallahs who are unable to pay for kallah classes as well. A Niman Mikvah Educational Fund Programming Committee made up of women from almost all of the shuls in our area, cutting across all age groups, has been planning a series of online events, and this is the first of the series, so we're very excited. Our next event will be focused on infertility and the mikvah, so mark your calendars, Tuesday, January 12th. We will be having more to say about that a little bit later on. I know we have a diverse group here this evening, and we're very happy to welcome everyone. I want to remind everyone that this presentation is for women only. Thanks to Zoom, we have women who may be joining us from outside of our area. And one of our goals over the coming months is to create achdus within our community around the mikvah. So if you are in the greater Washington area, we would love for you to identify yourself as a local by clicking on the reaction icon bottom on your screen and clicking on the clapping hand. Give everyone a moment to click on your clapping hand if you're a part of the greater Washington area. DC, Silver Spring, Virginia. Okay. And if you are from the greater Washington area, here's a quick reminder that it is that time of year when we ask for your annual membership contributions to the Mikvah Emunah Society. As we emphasize each year, user fees alone do not cover the costs of our operations, and we depend on you to ensure that the mikvah remains an integral part of Jewish life and of our local Jewish community. Your membership contributions ensure that we have funds to keep a safe environment for women to feel secure, especially during the pandemic, which has been challenging, but thank God successful. Maintain our state-of-the-art facility and equipment, and provide a clean and welcoming environment for all.
I'm on a Zoom. I'm busy.
We are putting a link into the chat at the moment at www.mikvahemunah.com. And you can click there to make your membership contribution.
You can find out what he needs.
You should be able to see.
Ask him what you need.
Here. The link should be below.
It's
Before I introduce our speaker tonight, I'd also like to acknowledge My Gift of Mikvah, a project of the Mikvah USA, which provides important support for our event this evening. So thank you very much, Mikvah USA. Some housekeeping items. We have placed all participants on mute, I believe, I hope. And we ask that you keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. The Zoom chat function is currently set up so that you can only send comments to the moderator, which is me. Once our speaker is finished her presentation, I will ask for some of your questions onto the chat, and we'll identify you by name if you would like. Otherwise, we would like to keep it anonymous for those who would like to be anonymous. And now for our program. We are delighted to welcome Mrs. Debbie Greenblatt, a dynamic speaker who brings 30 years of experience as a popular college teacher, lecturer, columnist, and coach on a wide range of topics, including Jewish texts, Jewish thought, and relationships. She is also the founder of the Women's Division of the Gateway's Kiruv organization. We asked Mrs. Greenblatt to address some of the challenges of going to mikvah in the context of a deeper understanding of the mitzvah of mikvah. While many women may find the experience of going to the mikvah transformative and uplifting, it may not always be that way for others. How can women feel more connected to this mitzvah? Mrs. Greenblatt, we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Rachel. Rachel and I go back a long way, so it's always nice to reconnect. And I want to thank the Mikvah Emunah Society of Greater Washington and the Robin Niman Education Fund and My Gift of Mikvah for making this evening possible. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to address all of you this evening. Now, anyone that has ever climbed Matzada probably was given a sense of how central the mitzvah of mikvah has been to the Jewish people throughout the ages. Matzada was a community under siege with almost no possibility of survival, and yet they built mikvaos on their mountaintop enclave, wanting to continue to attach to life even while collectively facing death. While the image is powerful, and the last time I was on Matzada was when I was 17 years old, I do remember it, and I remember the impact that it made on me. Yet, at the same time, the profundity of what the Jews did on that mountaintop doesn't really help me today in my own day-to-day struggles. We know that mikvah is an important part of the consciousness of the Jewish people, something that connects us back to the first Jewish woman and to every Jewish woman who has, sometimes with great ease and sometimes with great difficulty, taken the trouble to immerse in a kosher mikvah in every country of the world and in every era of our history. I hope that it's not presumptuous of me to assume that if you are tuning into a talk in support of your local mikvah, and as well as sponsored by My Gift of Mikvah, which is an organization whose mission it is to educate Jewish women of all stripes across the country about mikvah. So I am guessing that you value being part of the shared consciousness that are Jewish women. So I think that my only claim to fame is that I am maybe the biggest cheerleader of Jewish women out there. I believe that we're strong, that we have vision, and that for the last 2,000 years, we have rebuilt Jewish life in every different situation and location that the Jewish people have found themselves in. Yet, the observance of this profound mitzvah, the mitzvah of taharat hamishpacha, family purity, is not without significant challenges. As unique as we each are, that's how unique our obstacles and our hindrances to the proper fulfillment of this mitzvah will be. Since in the time that we have together tonight, it isn't possible to go through all the possible challenges, I would like to mention two categories of difficulties that I will later on address during this talk. So the first category I'll call relationship issues. It's not the mikvah per se, it's what comes after. Or said in other words, I don't mind going to the mikvah, I mind going home from the mikvah. And the second category of challenges are really more practical challenges. It's often inconvenient. Sometimes it's super inconvenient, as one woman related to me, like the time that she had to go to the mikvah on the Seder night, and she had 30 guests sitting around her table, wondering where she was. Like the challenge of, I'm exhausted, and this is just one more thing for me to do in an overprogrammed life. And the question that niggles at us, which is, why does it matter so much? I'll go when I want to get pregnant, so the baby will be kosher. Or, as I've heard more and more recently, I keep these laws. I wouldn't not keep these laws, but I really don't like being a nida. I don't like that time when my husband and I cannot touch. I feel distant from my husband during that time. And then there are the issues still under this category of that COVID has added to all of our lives. Husbands and wives who used to leave the home to work, who are now at home working or not working, either one of them stressful. Children who are home much more. It's tiring. There aren't breaks. There aren't the outlets that we usually have. Sometimes mikvah night is upon us and we feel like we haven't had any emotional space to miss him enough to want to even reconnect. Now, these are real issues and can prove to make the mikvah experience quite a difficult one. And I'm not going to shy away from them, but I would, with your permission, like to come back to them, because I'm a person that I could happily live in the world of ideas. Ideas excite me. And I would like to share some ideas, and then in the context of those ideas, come back to some of the challenges. So what are we doing when we involve ourselves in this mitzvah? And why should we look so hard for solutions to these issues that I've mentioned, and probably a whole host of issues that I haven't even mentioned? So I like context. I want to understand what I'm doing in terms of a bigger picture. I'm a person that when I go places, well, Google Maps is very convenient, but before Google Maps, I always had a map in my car because I like to see where I am in relationship to other things. My husband had a rebbe, a rabbi, a teacher, Rabbi Shlomo Freifeld of blessed memory. And he used to teach the women as well, and he gave fabulous classes, and I learned a tremendous amount. And something that he said way back when has shaped my worldview, and I want to share it with you. Rabbi Freifeld said that to live as a Jew, we cannot afford to be myopic, to live our lives with blinders on. Like, I haven't been to Manhattan. I live in New York, but I haven't been to Manhattan in months and months and months. But in the days where we used to go to Manhattan and tourists used to go to Manhattan. So there are the famous horses around Central Park that will take you for a nice romantic ride if it's not too cold out around the park. So those horses have blinders on to keep them walking on the straight and narrow. So Rabbi Freifeld used to say that we can't afford as Jews to live with blinders on. Rather, we have to paint the canvas of our own lives with broad brushstrokes to understand that what I do and how I do it not only affects me, and in the case of the laws of family purity and mikvah, my marriage and my family, but to understand that what we do, whether it's in the building of the mikvah or what we do when we get home from the mikvah, even in the privacy of our own homes and even in the privacy of our own bedrooms, sends out ripples beyond our family to community, to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people. And it's not an exaggeration to say, even to the world. Now, the laws of family purity, of taharat hamishpacha, are in the category that we call chukim. And those are laws that we were not told the exact reason for them. They're similar, in fact, to the laws of kashrut, to the kosher laws. Now, the laws of how we immerse in a mikvah, how a mikvah is built, how we prepare to go into the mikvah, all the laws associated with family purity are really the only laws that we have left of a great body of Jewish law, which was called the laws of tum'ah and tahara, of purity and impurity, which we haven't been able to keep since the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem almost 2,000 years ago. Now, why a mikvah, when properly built and properly used, creates a spiritual state which we call tahara, and why, as the great scholar Maimonides, the Rambam says, even if a woman will stand and all the waters of the world will wash over her, if it's not a mikvah and she hasn't prepared, it won't create that same shift, that same change, that same going from impurity to purity. I don't really like those words. We'll come back to that. Is something only God himself knows. But what we were given is called ta'amim. Ta'amim is from the word ta'am. Ta'am means a taste or a flavor. Our sages have shared with us deep insights and meanings of this mitzvah. I was thinking about it. It's a little bit like, I have a friend, she has since made Aliyah, she's moved to Israel, but she was interesting for an observant woman. She was a wine connoisseur. And she tried many times to introduce me to the finer elements of fine wine, not successfully, I might add. But she would take a sip of wine and she would like roll it around in her mouth before she swallowed it. And she would get like all kinds of experiences out of this sip of wine. I could tell you if it's red or if it's white, if it's dry or if it's sweet, and not a whole lot more. So what we want to do is deepen our understanding of mikvah so that we too can taste and acquire sensitivities for some of those ta'amim, some of those flavors. So first of all, taharat hamishpacha is a biblical law. It's one of the 248 positive commandments that are mentioned specifically in the Torah. And like all positive commandments that are biblical, their role is to move us forward spiritually, as opposed to the negative commandments, the don'ts of the Torah, which protect us from spiritual harm. So when we perform a mitzvah, any mitzvah, we are taking a moment in time and turning it into eternity. Time, which is the most fleeting thing in the world, right? It's here, then it's gone, can in fact create eternity, which is the most enduring thing. The spiritual energy that is created when we do a mitzvah accompanies us forever. It's the ultimate good use of time. So I've been speaking about this topic for lots of years, and when we used to be able to go places, I went lots of places to speak about it. And I've met all kinds of women. And I've had women say to me, you know what, Debbie, my relationship is okay. I don't need the on again, off again cycle to make it better. So leaving alone whether or not that is the case, we need to understand and remember that we are doing mikvah not only for ourselves, but also on behalf of the Jewish people. There is an element that only a Jewish married woman who immerses in a kosher mikvah after proper preparation can bring to our people. And that is called transcendence. What's transcendence? The transcendence is the ability to take something physical, earthy, mundane, the most physical thing in the world, and infuse it with a dimension of spirituality. What Shabbat is in time, the mikvah is in space. The other thing that's related to what Shabbat is in time, fill in the blank is in space, is actually the temple. But those two things, the mikvah and the temple which stood in Jerusalem, those two things are actually related to each other. So I'm sure you've heard this before, that we say more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. So I think that it's also accurate to say that more than throughout all the ages and all the places, Jewish women have kept the laws of family purity. The family purity has also kept Jewish women, and therefore Jewish families. And since the building block of the Jewish nation is the Jewish family, it has also kept us as a people. I want to share a story with you. I was a young married woman. I'm the oldest daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors. I just actually finished the year of mourning for my very special mother. And both my parents were orphaned from the war, and they got married and raised a beautiful family. But I was the first one of my mother's friends' children to get married. I had a young mother, and she had even younger friends. So at that time where I lived, there was only one mikveh in town. And that was where you went because there wasn't any place else to go. So I would always step into the mikveh. We didn't make appointments then. I would always step into the mikveh very tentatively, thinking, oh no, maybe I'm going to meet my mother or one of her friends. I couldn't really decide which would be worse, to meet my mother or her friends. So, but I really always, except for that, liked the mikvah waiting room, because I felt it was like this female bonding kind of experience, and you get to meet other women all there for the same reason. And I always liked it. So one night I went to the mikvah and I met a woman in the waiting room that looked really out of place. So being friendly, I engaged her in a conversation, and it's so many years ago, and I never forgot what she said to me. She said to me, I'm not an observant woman. I said, well, there's different levels of observance. I'm, trying to, whatever, just be nice and friendly. And she says, no, really, I'm not observant. In my family, we don't keep Shabbat, and we don't eat kosher food. Really, the most that we do is we go to the synagogue on the high holy days. So she saw me looking at her, and she said, I want to share something with you. When I was a young woman, way before I was married, my father would tell me, one day you're going to be a Jewish woman, and there's something that Jewish women do to ensure the future of the Jewish people, to ensure the viability of the next generation. They go to the mikvah every month, and that will be your responsibility too. So since I'm married, this woman said to me, I come every month, no matter what. I cannot tell you what a profound impact this non-observant woman had on my own mikvah observance. So with mikvah, and I'm sure you know this, but it just bears repeating, that we take the physical act, which can be at the same time the most violent, most egregious act between two people. Rape, I feel, is in some ways worse than murder, because God forbid, if a woman is raped, she doesn't die one time. She dies over and over again. And we take that same act and we elevate it, not only to be an act of love between two people. You don't need a mikveh for that. Other people have that too. But to be an act of transcendence that elevates the man and elevates the woman and brings this thing, which I keep referring to, called transcendence, kedusha, sanctity, into their union and brings God into their union. Now, I spent so many years pondering this. Why would you want God in that union? It's a funny place to invite God in. But really, it's not a funny place to invite God in, because one of the things, we know very little about God's essence. Mostly what we know about God is about how he interacts with our world. But one of the things we do know is that God is one. That's why our motto, our credo, our anthem of Judaism are the words of Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Okay, 6 words. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. He's one. He's the source of all life. He's the source of all things. So God wants to be in a place of oneness. He wants to be where there's real unity between two people. And why would we want God to be there? In that most intimate union and that closest time of intimacy? Because when God comes, blessing comes, bracha comes. And who doesn't need blessing in their life? Who doesn't need the blessing of good health and children and good children and sustenance and shalom, peace, harmony within our homes and outside of our doors and in Israel? Who doesn't need those blessings? So why would we not want to invite God in? So part of our mission statements as Jews is that, again, to paint the canvas with the broader brushstrokes, not just about us, but we were meant, part of our mission statement that we were given so long ago was to be or la'amim, to be a light unto the nations. Now, what this means in simple words is that through the way we are meant to live, we're meant to serve as an example of what an individual who lives with God consciousness looks like. And if we were doing it correctly, the benefits to individuals and families and society would be very apparent. And that's what it means that one of the greatest mitzvot, one of the greatest things that a Jew can do is to be Mekadeh Shem Shamayim, to sanctify the name of God in the world. That's how we sanctify the name of God in the world on a day-to-day basis. But the other part of our mission is to bring God, or sometimes we talk about it as spirituality, but there's no real spirituality without God, to bring godliness down to earth. Now, the world would love to convince us that public is one arena, the arena that matters, and private is a different arena, the arena that doesn't matter. And so if something is in your private arena and it's bothersome, so why bother? But honestly, nothing could be further from the reality. And I think innately we know this. Think about those days where you have a disagreement or a falling out with someone in your home, with a spouse, with a child, with a sister, with somebody that you live with. And think about having to leave your house and face the world on the backdrop of all those very difficult feelings. What happens at home is so very important, and we definitely should bother. So I'd like to take a little of a dive into deeper waters. Probably not going to get through everything that I'd like to say to you, but I'll pick and choose a few things so that we'll have time for questions at the end. So most people know that the word mikvah, right, a ritual bath built to very specific halachic specifications, is related to the word tikva, which means hope. And hope is something that is very, very important in Judaism. It's something that we don't talk about enough and we don't understand deeply enough. But I want to bring you a specific aspect of how mikvah puts tikva in our lives. So we live in a fractured world. I don't think anybody in our country, having read the news for the last few months, could say any differently. And we've all suffered fractures in our life. Those hairline cracks that appear as a result of experiences or relationships that left us feeling less than whole. Now, a mikvah is a place of wholeness. It takes us back to that place that where human beings existed before sin, before confusion, before distraction. It connects us to the holy waters that left Eden, and it connects us to creation, which first was matter, and then God imposed form on it. But the matter is spoken about, if you look in the verses of the Torah, it's spoken about as water. So the idea of a mikvah giving us hope, and I'm going to talk about it in a very real way, is the idea that when we enter those waters and we connect back to the waters of creation before form was imposed on them, then we too can touch that. And on some level, we have the ability to reform ourselves, to recreate ourselves. As Jews, we live by the moon. not by the sun, because the moon recreates itself every single month. Now, a mikvah, as we call it, really is from the word Mikvah Mayim. Mikvah Mayim literally means a gathering of water. In our fragmented and fractured existence, and I am speaking about myself, we can literally be all over the place. I know that feeling very well, of trying to be too many things to too many different people with not enough time to do any, to feel like I have not enough time to do any one of those things particularly well. This leads us to agitation and turmoil and anxiety. Now, in the gathered waters of the mikvah, we have the opportunity to regather ourselves, to gather ourselves back, to bring the pieces back, to put the puzzle back together, to appear before God, because that's who we appear before in a mikvah, and just as importantly, to appear before ourselves as who we really are, as who we are in our essence. We are women, we are Jews, we are servants of the Almighty. Now, we're in the mikvah. We're in the mikvah just a few moments. We'll emerge from the waters, and our entire life will still be there. All the things that made us crazy before will be there waiting for us. Yet if we use the opportunity that the mikvah provides to gather ourselves back to wholeness, to heal those fractures by remembering who we are in our essence, to touch those primordial waters that were there before a form was imposed on us, then we can go back to doing the things that we did before. But really, truly, we can do them with a little bit more equanimity, with a little bit more serenity. And that serenity comes from being in touch, not with our outside, our externals, not with all the things we wear and hold and drive, but with our essential selves. It's an experience of, if you use it that way, it's an opportunity to use the mikvah as a regroup, a reset, to take stock, and to reorder our lives in the way that really reflects who we really are and reflects the direction that we truly want to go in. Maybe we'll spend those few moments in the mikvah. Mikvah ladies are generally wonderful, and we'll give you that time to pray, to think, to reflect. So if we use that time, maybe we'll come out of the mikvah and maybe we'll let go of something in our lives that we were paying too high a personal price for and isn't really on our most important trajectory. Maybe we will recommit to giving more of our best self to those who are closest to us, instead of giving them what's left over from everything that we do, which seems so urgent in the moment, but when we really take stock is not as important when viewed from the
in case you didn't know, that's where you're headed.
Of our most critical set of values. Okay, could the host just mute everybody, please?
I'll protect him.
Okay.
I'll protect him.
Okay. All right. Everyone just please check that you're muted. Thanks so much. Okay. So let me do a few more moments and I'll come back to the challenges and then we'll stop for questions. Okay. Now, there are other benefits to the mikvah that are more easily felt, that are, and I'll just mention one or two. So First of all, I feel that there's tremendous psychological benefit. It's not why we do it, but I do think that there is tremendous psychological benefit in going to the mikveh. First of all, even the prep. Who sits in the bath? Who has time to sit in the bath? Now, I remember those years when I sat in the bath with a lot of little hands banging on the door, going, Ima, when are you coming out and what are you doing in there? I do remember that. But at some point in our life, we'll actually have a little peace and quiet to take a bath, or we'll take a bath in the mikveh. So we'll, when COVID's over, so we'll have quiet. But we're running and we're running and we're running. And sometimes we have to stop running. And psychologically, mikvah gives us that perfect opportunity, not just to stop and take stock of who our essential selves is, to be who we are in front of God, but also to think about our relationships and think about our marriage and think like, okay, where was I last month? Where am I this month? Where do I want to be next month? Am I moving in the right direction? What can I do to help us get there? And then in more down-to-earth spiritual terms, when you're standing in a mikveh, you are how you were born. You're standing before God and yourself. And you're in the perfect state to ask the creator of the world for anything. You know why you're in the perfect state to ask the creator of the world for anything? Because there's nothing more humbling than standing in some water with no clothes on. It's very, very humbling. And whenever we do one of the women's 3 mitzvot, of course, the other 2 being the lighting of the Shabbat candles and the separating of kallah, hafrashat kallah, which we do when we bake bread or challah. So anytime we do one of those mitzvahs, it's an ace ratzon, which means a time where God's deepest desire is to hear our deepest desire. And it's a time to turn to the only one that can really help. It's interesting to note that the change which mikvah brings, which is a change to the status of taharat, of ritual spiritual purity, doesn't take place when we go into the mikvah. It actually happens when we emerge from the mikvah. So it's not just about the water. It is about water and kosher mikvah and good prep. It is about those things. Can't happen without those things. But it's also about how we're going to take the opportunity to use the mikvah. So the wholeness, and I'll just add this and then I'll go to the challenges, and that is the following. I've said purity, impurity, and I said I don't like those words. So I'm going to take the bull by the horns and address for just 2 minutes the idea of purity. I don't like the word, and probably a lot of people don't like the word, because impurity sounds so bad. Like, I don't want to be that, and like, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with me. But purity is not what we think. I want to give you an image. A small infant in its mother's embrace feels perfect. Perfect? Really? She can't yet walk, and she can't yet talk, and she can't ask for anything that she needs, and she can't even sit. And very early on, we're not even sure how much she sees. Yet she feels perfectly connected, perfectly cared for, and perfectly whole. The mikvah is what allows us to tap into that wholeness, not the wholeness of our mother's embrace, but the wholeness of our Father's embrace, our Father who is the Father of us all. Mikvah represents the hope that our fractures will heal and we will feel whole. And taharat is exactly that. Purity is wholeness. It's the feeling of my life is not perfect. My situation is not perfect. I am far from perfect. But I am perfectly whole in the embrace of a God that truly loves me. And I'm perfectly whole in the embrace of a God that only wants what is truly good for me. So let's go back to the challenges, okay? So the Talmud says that a wedding never happened without there being some dispute. It's not because we're cantankerous or combative, but for a much more profound reason. There are always going to be obstacles to accomplish something that is important and is also spiritual. Each new Jewish couple that gets married is a brick in the third temple that will come with the coming of Mashiach, with the redemption. So of course there are going to be obstacles, and they come in the form of disputes. So the world was created with that kind of a balance, that wherever there's tremendous potential for growth and for change and for really moving forward, there's going to be equal challenges and obstacles that try and interfere and intervene and keep us from getting where in our heart of hearts we know we want to get. I'll give you another example. You know, a baby boy is born, and in 8 days old, we give him a bris. We enter him into the covenant of Abraham. Another Jewish boy joins the tribe. Now the Hasidim have a custom. It's not a law, it's a custom, which has since been adopted by many, which is that the night before the bris, they have something called a vachnacht. And what do? They bring out the baby, they make little pekalach with candy, and they bring a bunch of cute little kids, really little kids, like 5, 6 little kids, old enough to know the Shema. And they stand around the baby's little bassinet, and they sing the Shema. And of course, they get rewarded with the pekalach. And then, as the custom really goes, the father stays up into the night learning Torah. Why? As a protection for the child. Why? Because the forces that God created in the world to keep things very balanced and to create obstacles when something good is about to happen are in play. Those obstacles are so that we cannot, not so that we should get distracted from our path. Those obstacles are there so that we should push through them, so that we should overcome them. And then they take us further along the path that we need to be going. So when there are challenges and when there are obstacles, it is the best indicator that something large is on hand, that there's real potential for growth and there's real potential for change. And you know, I really feel that the challenges that we have really need to be seen in this greater context. Because, you know, context colors our experience. Imagine that you have, in Silver Spring, do you have Hatzalah, or a Jewish ambulance service? You don't. Oh, I hope you will soon. But let's leave Hatzalah out of it. Let's say you get a call from the executive director of the largest hospital in your region. And they say, Rachel, okay, sorry, Rachel, picking on you. Okay, Rachel, we have a human heart that has to be transported 100 miles. We see that you are right near the hospital. Drop everything. Come pick up that heart and drive it 100 miles because it's going to save somebody's life. What would you say? I'm tired. I don't really feel like it. It's cold outside. No. If you could give somebody life, what wouldn't you do to give somebody life? What won't you do to give yourselves life? It's not so different. It's just that a heart we could see and a soul we can't see as long as it's still encased in our bodies. That's the only difference. Now, the relationship challenges are in some ways the most difficult. I referred to them before. And it's certainly beyond the scope of what we can talk about here. But I really want to suggest to you that perhaps you can form a group of women who are interested to do continuing marriage education. I want to mention two things that I'm part of both of them. Okay, there's some car outside. Okay, I want to mention two things. That there's this organization which helped sponsor tonight's talk, My Gift of Mikvah, that has a group of some of the most outstanding and wise presenters. I feel very humbled and honored to be a small part of that group, who can, and I'm sure that you have illustrious Rebbitzins in your own community, that really there's so much to know. I can't tell you, no matter how long you've been married, there are things to know and things to do. And I would really suggest that you get some of that knowledge and find a way to form a group and learn with a like-minded group of women. But in terms of mikvah and relationships, there's something important that I want to share. I feel that, of course, it's connected to your relationship. And if your relationship is going through a hard time, the mikvah is going to be a much more difficult experience. I'm not unreal. I'm very real. And every marriage, even good ones, go through their hard time. But I want to say to you this. You know, Passover is probably our most labor-intensive holiday. Prep for Passover is even more than preparation for the mikvah. And so let's say you're preparing Passover, and right before Passover, something happens in your home that gets you really, really upset. And it's pretty close to the Seder night. So the Seder night comes, and you say, I'm still upset. You're still reeling from whatever it is that distressed you, whatever it was that made you upset. So you're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to eat matzah tonight because I'm so upset. Why should I eat the matzah? Now, matzah, the eating of matzah on the first night of Passover is also one of those 248 positive commandments. Matzah is that physical thing, just like a mikvah is a physical thing. Matzah is a physical thing that helps us tap in to the energy of true freedom. Whatever it is, each one of us has to be freed from. Am I going to give that up because I'm mad at somebody? Am I going to not eat matzah because I'm upset? What does one thing have to do with the other? So relationships have to be worked on. They always have to be worked on. Our marriages always need continued investment. There's never a time that a marriage doesn't need continued investment and some tweaking and sometimes even some serious repairs. But what does that have to do with not getting the benefit? You as a woman, as a Jewish woman, what does that have to do with not getting the benefit of mikvah itself? It's also for you, mikvah. It's also something that you contribute to the Jewish people. You bring taharat and kedusha into the Jewish people. Why would you miss out on that opportunity? And in terms of the practical things, I'll say this. The practical things require practical solutions. And there are so many practical solutions. You know, when I was first married, I was an oldest child. Since my parents were both Holocaust survivors, I didn't have any aunts or uncles, and I didn't have any cousins. And I was the second girl in my class to get married, and the first one lived far away. And I had a kid right away, and I had no idea what I was doing at all, period, end of story. But there was a girl that I sort of connected to. She had 3 kids already, so she was like a whole big expert. And I used to call her and ask her questions and say things like, my kid keeps playing in the toilet. What should I do? And she told me, this is a funny thing that I remember this. She said, Debbie, take a chair, put it in front of the sink, stand the kid on the chair, put on the water, take everything else away, and let the kid have a good time. And I said, oh, such an easy, practical solution to a a practical problem that stymied me. Well, there are practical solutions to a lot of the difficulties of mikvah. Of course, it's all going to be how difficult we find them and how much we are willing to seek out solutions has to do with the context that we see the problem in. Mikvah is an opportunity that doesn't last a lifetime. It's only an opportunity from when you get married until menopause. If you get married after menopause, you do immerse in the mikvah one time before your wedding. If you're married and you're listening to this and you've never had the opportunity to immerse in a mikvah and you're post-menopause, well, you can learn the laws and immerse in a mikvah once and gain a tremendous amount of the benefit, even retroactive benefit for you and your family. So I told all my callahs all the years, life is an adventure, because that's how I see life. And mikvah is part of that adventure. It's the intrigue that you and your husband have together, planning, plotting, strategizing, how to get out of the house on Friday night with people there, how to leave your sister's wedding and, not have the whole place talking about it. There's so many different things that come up. We all have our war stories and we all have our funny stories. And they really make up part of the fabric of a wonderful Jewish life. I think at this point, Rachel, if there's time, I'd love to open up for a few questions. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenblatt. This has been a public honor, but definitely a personal pleasure as well. So we so appreciate your warm words of Torah and inspiration. Okay, so before we turn to questions, I'm going to be putting a link in the chat in case you would like to make a contribution to support this event and activities like it. The link will take you to the Mikvah Emunah Society and will be supporting the Rabbi Niman Mikvah Educational Fund. So,
Rachel,
Lori, yes.
Rachel, can I just jump in? I wanted to tell the women also about another initiative that I am part of that I think it's just very important for people to know about. There's a new helpline that is just going live now called the Ani Ledodi helpline. And this is for Jewish observant women who are struggling with questions related to intimacy. I am not going to be manning the hotline, but I am one of the people that they refer to. And I'm going to actually give you the number of the help. It's a helpline. It's to get guidance of where to be referred to for different problems related to intimacy and mikvah observance. And it's a very beautiful thing. It's under rabbinical auspices. The training was fantastic. We were trained by observant sex therapists. And this is a really excellent thing. It's called the Ani Ledodi helpline. And the website is aniledodihelpline.org, and the telephone number is 646-746-4343. Public service announcement. That's all. Go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
Lori, can we put that in the chat? Let's have the number one more time. 646.
One more time, please.
646-746-4343. It's the Ani Ledodi, exactly how it sounds, Ani Ledodi helpline.org.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am also going to be putting a link in the chat of a survey. I'm not sure if you'd like to answer the survey right now, you can. Otherwise, it will be emailed as well in terms of how you enjoyed this event and just asking you some questions about further events that you'd like to see in the future. Okay, so we are going to be taking a few questions right now. If anyone has any questions, they can start putting them in the chat. We'll wait for a couple people to join that. Also want to thank again My Gift of Mikvah and Mikvah USA for this very, very wonderful honor to help us support this evening.
Okay, I just looked at the chat, the Ani Lidodi helpline. It's ANILE LEDODI helpline.org. Ani, there's just an E missing. ANILEDODI helpline.org.
Okay. Did we get it?
No.
Okay.
Ani
Ledodi, L-E, Ledodi
Okay.
helpline.
I already just reposted it.
LED.
L-E,
I got it.
you got it?
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Questions. We still have 181 wonderful participants. Let's see some questions from the community and outside the community. Okay. Is it really so necessary to have an attendant watching you? Is it that we don't trust women going down, or that, it seems kind of personal? Why do I need to have somebody there? I feel like I want to just be alone.
Great question. Great question. Okay, so I'll tell you the only reason that the mikveh attendant is there. Because, the law is, and I want to just say a word about law. Law aren't rules. Law is the physical embodiment of a spiritual reality. And I'm going to try and demonstrate that to you in just a second. Okay, so the law is that to be tovel, to immerse in a mikveh, all of you, including all of your hair, has to be under the water for 1 moment. Okay, so people immerse different amounts of time. Those are customs. But the law is that in order for tevilah, immersion, to take place and affect the change in status, the woman has to be completely immersed in the water for 1 moment. That means that her hair can't be floating on the top, and it means that she can't brush the side of the mikveh. Now, I don't know how many times I personally have had the experience of going into a mikveh myself. And because the woman's there, she said to me, Debbie, do it one more time. Your hair was on the top. Or Debbie, do it one more time. You brushed the side of the mikveh. And I had no sense of either of those two things. So that is really the reason that the mikveh attendant is there. I have found something so unbelievable, and I'm sure you have this in your mikveh too. And I've been in mikvahs all over the world. And that is that it's a very special kind of a woman that's drawn to this kind of a job. And even though it's like, we emphasize modesty so much, and it seems somewhat immodest to be unclothed in front of somebody else, but they only look when they have to look. And, I don't know, do they do this in your mikveh? Like the holding the robe up so that when you're coming out, there's no reason for them to look, and they don't look. So the mikveh attendant is there for that reason, to make sure that the tevilah is in fact a kosher one. If a woman is immersing in an ocean someplace, don't necessarily recommend that. It's a little scary, a little dangerous, because she's on vacation in I don't know where with her husband. Her husband can watch her too, and he would serve exactly the same purpose of just making sure that she went all the way under the water for 1 moment. And that's the purpose of the mikveh attendant. But I think that mikveh attendants are being better and better trained and are becoming more and more sensitive. And as we become more educated in mikveh, the understanding that sometimes a woman wants to take time to pray, to collect her thoughts, to just be who she is and figure that out in those moments, I think that there's a lot of respect and room for that. Even on a busy night at the mikveh. But thank you for asking. Great question.
Thank you. I still find some of the mikveh preparations to be very stressful and nitty gritty. Do you recommend anything to keep in mind in order to keep calm before being tovel?
Okay, great. Another great question. I love that question as well. So I would say that something that I do recommend is the following. If you find the preparations stressful, and that really is, I think, a large function of a particular person's personality. You know, some people won't sweat it and some people will. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. But I like to separate the prep from the bath. In other words, like, do your prep in the bath, out of the bath, however you do it, wherever you do it, in your room, in your bathroom, and then sit in the bath already prepared. So that, in other words, that way you can actually take advantage of that prep time as being like more relaxing time instead of stressful time. So if you do your nails, and make sure your makeup's off, and make sure your contact lenses are out and the bandages are off, and all the things that we do going, of course, you know this, I'm sure, the head to toe, we start here and we work our way all the way down. So and we do that and then give ourselves time in the bath. So then we're done. And the bath is good prep. It's good collecting time before we go into the collected waters, the gathered waters of the mikveh. So that's just, if it's helpful to anybody, it's just one of those, tips you learn along the way. So, I just wanted to add something in that, and that is that I mentioned that Jewish law is just the physical embodiment of a spiritual reality. To think of it just as rules is to really, just not really understand the depth of it. So we talked about the idea of, being able to gather oneself together and mend the fractures and feel whole in the waters. And one of the reasons and being able to pray in the waters, and one of the reasons is because we are just ourselves. It's just us, our body, soul, thought, prayer, not formal prayer, informal prayer, the words of our heart, the words of our soul. So the law is that there can't be any intervening substances between the body and the water. But if you think about it in terms of that, it's something that makes perfect sense. I don't want anything intervening between me and the water at that moment, because I want to feel completely enveloped in that water. I want to touch that primordial water. I want to touch that part that could heal me. I want to I want to feel that it is just me in my essence standing before myself and standing before God in that moment. And so anything that intervenes separates me from that on some level, from that experience. So you see that the laws are really just the physical embodiment of a certain spiritual reality. And that's why Jewish law is called halacha. Halacha doesn't mean rules. Chukim are rules. Halacha means walking, going. It takes me where I need to go. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. I still feel very uncomfortable with a rabbi needing to look at my badika class when there's a question. Why can't this be done by a woman? So if I may, I'm just going to add a comical personal anecdote. I felt profoundly uncomfortable and my poor husband didn't know what to do. So I said, you know what? Let's see how you like it if you're going to send your underwear. So for the first few months of my marriage, every time I had to send something to the rabbi, he put his underwear in there also. And the Rav wanted to know why would there a men's underwear. He said, this is shalom bayis. My wife said, if she has to feel uncomfortable, I have to feel uncomfortable. And that's how we manage it. But I want to hear, obviously, Debbie's perspective.
Right. It's always uncomfortable. So, and more, it is uncomfortable. And, the only reason that we do it is because he's the expert. It takes years to master the nuances of those laws. Now,
so the question is, can it be done by a woman? Can it be done by a woman?
So today they have boat coats and they have different, I'm not going to go into all the different categories of women who have studied these laws, but the way that they're generally used is that they also study the laws, and they can then look at the badika cloth or the underwear, whatever they're looking at, and they can relate to the rabbi exactly what they see, and the rabbi can then give his decision. And in most cases, he doesn't, because the woman is extremely well trained, he doesn't have to actually see it himself. In certain cases where there's a question, he might ask to see it. So, and that's something that has definitely made women more comfortable. Another thing that's made women more comfortable, I know in my community, there's a whole system in place where you can really ask the rabbi anonymously, and he's really being asked for his expertise. And one more thing I would say about that, and that is that his main goal, and I've had many rabbis explain this to me after I question them incessantly, okay? Their main goal is to keep husband and wife together as much as possible. Their goal is not to look for ways to separate husband and wife. Their goal is to look for ways to keep husband and wife together. So we're just going to the expert. And that's why we do it. No different than we would go to, any kind of a doctor and not only expose our clothing, but expose parts of our body. Why are we doing it? We have no connection there. We have no relationship. It's not comfortable. It's because they spent a lot of years in medical school getting trained for this. So rabbis spend a lot of years getting trained for this. And that's why we use them.
Thank you. Could you please address some of the challenges of women who have trouble getting clean, continuous spotting, continuously going to the mikvah, and the challenges of going through those difficult routines?
That is a really difficult challenge and can put a lot of stress on a woman and on a relationship. And most women go through that, believe it or not, at one point in their life. If they keep these laws from a young age, because as we age, our bodies change. And, a woman could have not spotted for 10, 15 years, and then all of a sudden she's spotting and going through a difficult time, or a woman can go through, unfortunately, a miscarriage or some other physical thing. And so that really is a very difficult challenge. One piece of advice on this is get expert advice. Like when you have a cold, you go to your garden variety physician. And when something serious more comes up, you go and find a specialist. So I would say the same thing here, that, our rabbanim are wonderful, and they spend their time and their effort trying to serve us really, and service us and our needs, our personal needs in our relationships. But if something is gone way beyond the regular, and you're in a situation where it's very hard to get clean, and therefore hard to get to the mikvah, and therefore your intimacy is on hold, and that creates its own set of challenges, I would certainly, in a practical way, suggest getting expert advice. There are rabbis, and then there are rabbis. There are specialists in this area. And I would definitely, seek to get some input that way. The other point I would make is just a hashkafic one, and that is that, if I would have been in charge of my own calendar of when I went to the mikvah and when I could touch my husband and when I couldn't touch my husband, it would really look very different than what actually happened. Yontif, when I was looking forward to, being together with my husband, and then my period comes like right when I light candles for Yontif, and there goes the Yontif. That's not something that I would have planned. So what you learn over time is that, the pasuk is b'yadcha itosai. God, my times are in your hands. And we learn to see the tremendous divine providence in each particular situation. And sometimes we get old enough and mature enough to look back on some of those times that were difficult and were challenging, and we would have written the script differently. And we see that there was some way that we needed to grow that took place during that time. There was some aspect of our relationship that needed improvement outside of the bedroom that happened during that time. So every stressful situation is really an opportunity to grow yourself in a way that you wouldn't ordinarily do, that you wouldn't ordinarily grow. Because what a nisayon is a test from Hashem is that something that we really need in our lives is taken away from us. And we're asked, therefore, to dig more deeply within ourselves, to find resources, to find emunah, to find faith that we really didn't know that we had. And so I hope your challenges pass very quickly and you could get back to a regular schedule. But thank you for asking that question.
Okay, I think we're going to do one more question and then end here.
Okay.
I feel uncomfortable with the fact that religion dictates when the intimacy I have with my husband takes place. Does it have to be that way? Why is it that's dictated for me? I feel uncomfortable with that.
I could completely understand that. And in a lot of ways, I could really relate to that. One challenge that even very committed mikvah observers have mentioned to me over the years is the challenge of actually being together on mikvah night, because it seems very prescribed. So I think that, you know, there is still a lot of room for spontaneity. And I think the fact that we pace our intimate life according to the law and according to our cycle and according to the immersion in the mikvah is really speaks of something very profound, that our unions with our husbands is bigger than both of us, that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. That something is the Jewish people. That something is that we are both standing, as I said before God, and that he too is a partner here, which really sort of elevates the whole thing. Now, it is challenging sometimes. I'm not going to say that it's not challenging sometimes, but I will tell you that mikvah is the most unbelievable training for continued intimacy, even post-menopause, as long as husband and wife both continue to be healthy and able, which should be a very, very long time. There's no reason that it shouldn't be a very long time. In other words, submitting yourself, which definitely can be inconvenient sometimes. It can be not what I want at this moment sometimes, definitely. But you cannot imagine that couples that stick to this while the woman is still menstruating, the benefits that they have post-menopause. First of all, just for starters, a man who was in that cycle of that he couldn't always have his wife when he wanted, hopefully he wants, okay, that his respect for her as a human being and not just something as his plaything never goes away. It never goes away. He is so trained to see her as something that he can't have all the time. Now think about this. You know, Masters and Johnson, the first sex therapist, I don't know how many years ago that is already, maybe 30, I don't even know. But they had this lab where they had people move in and they figured out basically taharat hamishpacha. They're going to have the people sleep together for 2 weeks and then not sleep together for 2 weeks. You know, they figured it out. And it worked great in the lab, and it never worked when the couple went home. Why did it never work when the couple went home? It never worked when the couple went home because he would say, honey, come on, you know. And she'd say, no, we can't, because like we're on the off cycle. Remember, you know, we paid all these thousands of dollars to Masters and Johnson, you know, to help us. Like we're in the off time. And then he goes off in a huff because she refused him. This isn't about the woman refusing her husband. This is about that there's an ebb and flow in our relationship that is built in by the creator of the world, that allows me to have amazing intimacy with my husband, but also allows me to have a best friend and the person who is my best cheerleader and everything else that I also want in the relationship. And he doesn't have to be insulted that 2 weeks that I need some time to regroup, that now I just want the cheerleading best friend part. He's never insulted. If it was anything other than divinely ordained, it would A, never work, and B, it would be, you'd have to be doing damage control in the relationship.
Thank you. Debbie, we cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share these very inspiring words and tackle some difficult challenges and questions and issues. So really, really thank you very, very much from the bottom of the Silver Spring heart of our community. Okay, the survey link is linked below for those of you that can click on it. It will also be emailed to you as well afterwards if that's more comfortable, and we really appreciate if those of you who joined us tonight, again, thank you to everyone who's joined us, could please fill out that survey. Just quickly, as we mentioned earlier, we will be having our second Rabbi Niman Mikvah Educational Fund event on Tuesday, January 12th. It will be a panel discussion on infertility, pregnancy loss, and mikvah. Some of the attendees will be Dr. Amy Barron, a well-known speaker on infertility, who is the founder and executive director of I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, as well as Ellie Shevel-Levitt, a resident of Camille, who will share her experience and personal story, and a few others. But please save the date on your calendar, January 12th at 8 p.m. Okay.
I would like to thank everybody. Can I thank everybody? Thank you for coming on. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Rachel, for inviting me. And to the Mikvah Emunah Society of Greater Washington and the Rabbi Niman Education Fund and My Gift of Mikvah for making this evening possible. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. All right, ladies, have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Be well.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.